Hello, welcome back to Let's Play Jane's Fighters Anthology as we do the reading in the manual for the Baltic campaign, which I almost forgot about, but without any further ado, let's begin. Campaign History, Baltic, Jane's Intelligence Review, 3rd of January, 1996, Volume 8, Issue 3, page 107. Estonia, Facing Up to Independence, by Felix Corley. Despite recent turbulence at the top, both on the political and military side, Estonia has single-mindedly pursued its eventual goal of protection from a potentially predatory Russia by full integration into European political and defense structures. After being stripped bare of almost all the Soviet Army's military hardware in the wake of independence, Estonia had to build up its armed forces from scratch. The architect of this, since his appointment as commander of the defense forces in May 1993, was former U.S. Army Colonel Alexander Einseln. His sacking in early December last year brought to an end the first reasonably successful attempts by this small Baltic state to face the challenges and potential threats to its independence. Defense Forces structure. Current conscription rules mean that the large number of Russian speakers who have not been given citizenship are excluded from service. While this ensures that young Russian men do not acquire military training that might be used against the Estonian state, provides a dilemma for the government, which is considering some kind of service for them, although this is likely to be outside the scope of the combat forces. Estonia's concerns over Russia. Following the breakup of the Soviet Union at the end of 1991, the Russian Federation and Estonia signed a treaty on the 12th of January 1992. Relations soon deteriorated, with hostilities centering around the issue of ex-Soviet troops stationed in Estonia. After much international pressure, Russia eventually agreed to withdraw its forces from all three Baltic states. Estonian President Meri and Russian President Yeltsin signed a treaty in Moscow on the 26th of July 1994, outlining the terms of withdrawal of all remaining Russian forces from Estonia, with the exception of those from the Paldiski nuclear facilities on the Pakri Peninsula, which were dealt with separately under an agreement signed 4 days later. Now that the Russian forces have gone, the major bone of contention is the disputed border. Estonia complains that Russia is reluctant even to discuss the disputed territories, amounting to some 2,300 square kilometers around Pekori, Petsar, Saaremaa, and around Ivangorod, Janelin, included in Estonia under the 1920 Tartu Treaty, but transferred to the USSR in the wake of the wartime annexation. In 1994, President Boris Yeltsin pledged on a visit to the Russian side of the border that his country would not return 1 centimeter of territory. Although joint border talks last year made some progress in agreeing the sea border, progress in the disputed territory has been minimal. The Foreign Ministry also points out that Russia has never acknowledged that Estonia was illegally occupied by the Soviet Union. At the same time, it expressed concern about rising Russian nationalism in the run-up to the December elections to the Russian Duma, and declared that 4 of the 6 leading contenders for the Russian presidency supported reincorporating the Baltic states into Russia. Now that the Russian elections are over, tensions should ease somewhat. However, Russia clearly remains the main threat to Estonian independence. Jüri Arusu, a counselor at the Foreign Ministry, spells this out bluntly. The main enemy is Russia, that's clear. Others are more diplomatic. Viktor Polyakov, a spokesman at the Defense Ministry, says Estonia does not have enemies. Our main enemy is instability. There is no difference where instability comes from, whether north, south, east, or west. Estonia and NATO. Like the other 2 Baltic states, Latvia and Lithuania, Estonia sees the only realistic way to secure its defense as full integration into Western Europe, including membership of the European Union, the Western European Union, and NATO. In applying for EU membership, Estonia made clear that national security was just as important a factor as the opportunity to join its political structures and to participate in the EU's vast economic market. One of the advantages of membership, the government stated, would be increased security through economic ties with West European countries and through participation in European security structures. Despite the lack of funds, which Uvel has admitted has hampered participation in joint NATO exercises, Estonia sets great store by its participation in international peacekeeping operations. Einseln proposed the formation of a peacekeeping unit during a meeting of Baltic military commanders in November 1993, and Baltbat, as it came to be called, was set up on the 13th of September 1994 by Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Estonia's first peacekeeping platoon, Espla 1, served in Croatia from February 1995 after Parliament passed a law allowing overseas peacekeeping service, and was replaced by Espla 2 in August 1995. Platoons were part of the Danish battalion, and Denmark has trained most of the Baltic servicemen who have participated in the UN peacekeeping operations in former Yugoslavia. Estonia has used the former Soviet Paldiski base as the headquarters of its own peacekeeping training. Baltic, which becomes fully operational this year, has 3 companies, one from each of the Baltic states, plus a logistics company. The main training base is at Adazi in Latvia. The battalion consists of 700 to 800 men, a third from each of the states. The 3 main positions, Commander, Deputy Commander, and Chief of Staff, are rotated between the 3 states, with Estonia currently appointing the commander. The USA has provided the largest resources in both money and equipment to get the battalion off the ground. Baltic cooperation. Another of Iceland's key goals was the creation of an effective military alliance, with Latvia and Lithuania, part of which is coming to fruition with Baltic. The 3 have held regular high-level political meetings, and Estonia has backed military cooperation, realizing that if Estonia is eventually to join NATO, it is likely to be only in association with the other Baltic states. In addition to meetings of the army commanders, the country's volunteer Home Guard chiefs met for the first time in October 1995 to discuss joint exercises. Estonia currently has no air defense network and sees Baltic cooperation as the most cost-effective way to build such a structure. The intention is to build a joint air control system for civilian and military forces. Cooperation with Estonia's southern neighbor, Latvia, was complicated in 1995 by a dispute over the demarcation of the sea border between the 2 countries. Estonian border guards had detained Latvian vessels fishing in disputed waters. This dispute temporarily affected relations between the 2 Baltic states, but both sides realized that close cooperation is essential. Perspectives. It is obvious Estonia could not hope to defeat a Russian attack should it ever come again. The country's defense policy therefore has to be geared around integration into wider defense structures. Baltic cooperation alone is not enough. Knowing that NATO membership, its clear objective, remains some way off, Estonia looks set to count on Western sympathy, which might eventually bring the country into closer integration with the rest of Europe on a political and economic level, and make up for its reluctance to integrate Estonia into military structures in the immediate future. As the former Soviet republic with perhaps the least military hardware and infrastructure of its own on independence, Estonia has done much to build up its embryonic forces, but will need to spend more money, which it can ill afford if it wishes to create a viable defense structure of its own. Frontline, Eastern Europe, 2nd of July 2004, Volume 32, Issue 7, page 19. Russia restores communists to power. In a resounding national rejection of crime, corruption, and Western-style capitalism, the people of Russia voted overwhelmingly to return control of their country to the Communist Party. Last month's elections gave communists a majority of more than 80% in parliament and virtually all significant executive positions. The new government is expected to move rapidly to dismantle capitalist reforms and return the country to a Soviet-style regime based on the old USSR as it existed before its breakup in 1990. Frontline, Eastern Europe, 4th of November 2007, Volume 36, Issue 11, page 22. Russia declares reunification of USSR. On the 24th of October, the 90th anniversary of the beginning of the Russian Revolution, the Supreme Soviet announced its intention to reunify the former USSR. The Soviet proclaimed that the 1991 breakup of the original Soviet Union was an illegal act and called for the immediate economic, political, and military reintegration of all former states of the Soviet Union into a single unified entity. The announcement was greeted with global indignation. Speaking for NATO, Secretary General Paklin said a return to 20th century policies of communist imperialism, conquest, and terror will not be tolerated, and that NATO would oppose all such policies to any degree which becomes necessary. Frontline, Eastern Europe, 3rd of August 2008, Volume 37, Issue 8, page 9. Belarus falls. After less than 6 weeks of fighting, the Belarusian government has surrendered to invaders from the resurgent USSR. Soviet troops crossed the Belarusian border on June 4th, and the government surrender was accepted on the 13th of July. Casualty totals for either side are unavailable at this time, but are believed to be light due to the small size of the Belarusian military. When news of the attack first broke, NATO moved rapidly to mass its forces in Latvia and Estonia to prevent further Soviet expansion into the Baltic states. Since the surrender, an uneasy peace has prevailed, but both NATO and the USSR continue to deploy troops to the new border. And that is it. So that is where we will be picking up the campaign next time. It is shortly after the fall of Belarus. So with that, thank you all for watching and stay tuned for next time, and we'll see you then.